Hey everybody. I say everybody. I don't even know who's listening to this, but yeah, I think today I want to talk about life after trauma, right? I think that it's something like everybody can relate to in one degree or another. I think we all have some type of thing we go through, like a really big one, and then that kind of sets the tone for a lot of years after it happens. And I think that's kind of something I'm trying to navigate currently, and something I wrote my entire book about, and pretty much everything. And so I guess I kind of want to just talk about my own journey, what my thoughts are, all those types of things. So my freshman year of college, I was sexually assaulted, and that was a really, really hard thing. And I finally, I think like literally this year, was able to like say it in front of a lot of people. And like, I mean, I think I'd posted it, but I also was like able to open up with more people than I ever had. Like literally just this year. And it happened like, I think almost 3 or 4 years ago. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember the timeline. But basically like my freshman year of college. And so I think kind of the years prior to this one, and I'm sure I'm still dealing with the after effects, I was kind of just navigating like how am I supposed to live past this thing that like totally changed how I view myself as a person, my friends around me, um, the like way that I connect with people romantically, also just the way I see myself and get pleasure in, a sexual way. I think that all of that changed completely. And for a while I felt like it was all pretty broken. I felt like there was no coming back from it. And that obviously wasn't true, and I'm so grateful that it's not, because now I can kind of stand forward and begin to share bits of my experience as I get more comfortable, and also navigate like how comfortable I sharing, these parts of myself with people, and like what's my boundary, or like when am I ready, in my relationships. And I'm still navigating that. I'm still kind of dealing with that. But I think that the most important thing is to be kind to yourself. I think that, for myself, like I began this kind of, I mean, I've always been a little bit like this, but I felt like it kind of, all of my traits that were insecurities almost got like magnified after this. And I found that really interesting. Like this drive to achieve that I had, like in my adolescence, when I was really young, I think it was a culmination of factors, right? From childhood stuff to being gay, blah, 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 blah. That all kind of made me this really competitive person and wanted me to be like best at everything I could possibly do. And that was, that was always kind of there. I think it was not like a super crazy thing, but after my assault happened, I think I don't even know how to explain it, but all of my insecurities were even like magnified. And so I went on this like whole journey of like going so hard in school, going so hard in my extracurriculars within college, and like doing all of these crazy things, like almost to mask. It's like I almost used it to mask like a lot of the pain that I was feeling inside. And eventually I hit my breaking point, and I mentioned this in my fear episode. I don't know what to call it. In my fear speech, I hit a breaking point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't perform anymore. And I like totally freaked out, and, had to write a book about it all and face everything. And now I'm kind of just in a spot where, okay, what do I do now, right? Like where do I stand? Like how do I navigate moving forward? Because now I'm in a place where achieving the best, being the best of the best, like I'm not really in an environment where I can do that anymore. Like I'm not in college, and I can still achieve things, but it's more of like on a personal goal, right? Like what do I want to do just for me, rather than, trying to like, show everybody that I'm the best. Because to me, all of this, that like all of the things that I was doing, all of the things that I, was trying to prove and be the best at, it was all like a performance, right? Like I was trying to prove to everybody, I'm all right, look at me, look how great I'm doing, you know, I'm not hurt at all. And it was also just because I didn't want to recognize that I had gone through one of the hardest things anybody can go through, and that I was weak at some points and I needed help and I was not okay, but like admitting that felt like defeat, you know? And I'm sure it was, you know, this mix of, right, all the things I mentioned before, but also I think being a man on top of that, there is this kind of pressure we get as men, especially as young men, to be really closed off and not feel like you have to, you know what I mean, like feel weak almost. And it's an unfortunate, you know, result of, I'm sure, the patriarchy and a whole bunch of other bigger terms. But it is something that men deal with all the time. And so, gay men, straight men, all types of men, anyone who's grown up, socialized as a man, knows that pressure, right, to not share your emotions, to not, you know, be vulnerable in that sense. And so for me, admitting, you know, one, that I was sexually assaulted, right, because that in itself is this whole thing, you know, being a man and then having another man take advantage of you it was this whole like thing in my head, because it made me feel weak and it fought against so many of the internalized issues that I had. And yeah, it like really messed me up and made me feel like I couldn't share this with anybody. I was so ashamed of it. And you know, then with like the other part of just, yeah, again, emotional vulnerability, that's so not okay as a man, which it is. I know it is now after dealing with my issues and all these types of things, but it was, you know, a thing that it's hard to explain, but it's this internal like, ugh, like I can't share this, I can't be vulnerable. And so now I've kind of forced myself out of that shell, like, okay, no, you have to share it with people, you have to talk to people about it, because you can't just carry on the weight over and over and over and over again. You know, I mentioned this in my book, but I'm sure a whole bunch of other people have said this. I feel like carrying on trauma or like emotional weight, like bottling it up, it's kind of like charging a credit card, and eventually you have to pay the bill, right? Like you can do minimal payments, you can, you know, slowly let a little bit out of all time, but eventually you're gonna have to pay the bill or die. And you know, most of us are not great at faking our own deaths, so you have to pay your credit card bill. You have to feel all of your emotions at some point. You have to face all of those painful parts of yourself, all those painful memories that you'd locked away, and you have to eventually be like, hi, you're there. And I have to feel you. I have to go through all this pain, because I think, you know, you still feel it inside. It's kind of like it's racking inside your chest or something like that. But, you know, you have to let it express itself. And so, yeah, life after trauma is such a weird thing, because I felt like my perception, at least for a while, I think with my case, it was very weird because it was something that dealt with memory too, because in my case, I wasn't fully conscious for my assault. And so I was very, I don't know, for me, like the lack of memory was such a big issue for me too, because obviously I wasn't conscious and able to consent or anything like that. And so that was something, you know, that, you know what I mean? Like it was messed with my memory. And so for me, it was like also trusting my brain to just do basic things, right? To like just maneuver, like to lock my door or to make sure all my things were unplugged. Like I still deal with this, like checking everything 500 times, and I'll lock something and I know it's locked, but I still go back and check it in. And I'm sure this is like a manifestation of something very specific in psychology. I thought maybe OCD, but also I don't want to self-diagnose, but it is something I deal with, and it's getting better now. But at first it was like this whole thing. I like couldn't trust my brain. And that also was a problem in admitting this thing had happened to me. Because I was like, well, no, I can't trust my own perception and all those types of things. So it was a really trippy experience, but nonetheless, it was my experience. And so like navigating, like trusting yourself moving forward, because that's for me was like one of the biggest things. It was trusting myself, and then of course other people, but like trusting myself first, because when you feel like you can't trust your own brain, you feel like you can't trust your own memories, everything feels like it's malleable, like it just felt like this whole thing. And for me, it put me in a spot where I was very vulnerable, and I was very like post-trauma, like I was a very vulnerable person. I not like in the sense of expressing myself emotionally, but vulnerable in the sense where I felt like I could be taken advantage easily in, relationships or friendships or anything like that. And so for me, like, I found myself entering maybe toxic relationship patterns, right? Whether that was like a codependent relationship or whether that was, a series of hookups, right? Like I never found myself like searching for something stable post trauma. And I'm realizing this now as I'm talking about it. I feel like for me, the things that excited me or the things that I felt like, oh, this is love, or oh, this is connection, or oh, this is what I want, were the things that I wasn't feeling safe or secure around. I wasn't feeling like I felt comfortable in expressing myself and living freely as I do. And I think I don't regret any of the things that I've done because, that eventually led me to, realizing things about myself and learning more about myself than I ever had before my trauma. And so in a way, I think now, obviously, that sucked that it happened to me, but it was also, you know, I have to see it this way for me to move on. It was an opportunity for me to grow. It was an opportunity for me to learn more about myself. And for that, I'm grateful, right? And that's the only way I think for myself, I've had to like be okay with it because, it happened and there's nothing I can do to control the fact that this thing happened to me. Um, but the only thing I can do is move on and figure out how am I supposed to do that? Like, what are tools? And so for me, I found that kind of viewing it as like a fatalistic thing, right? You know what I mean? Like viewing it as all of this comes together in a beautiful way. And, I've gotten stronger. I've learned so much more about myself. I feel like for me, that kind of helped me, I guess, move past it. And I don't know. I think I'm somewhat past it now. I think I wouldn't say all the way. I think now with this book thing, I'm trying to prove something to myself that, it does have meaning. And so I think I'm kind of trusting in the universe to maybe give it meaning in a way. Which, if it does, great. If it doesn't, I at least got a way for myself to feel more at ease and to realize more about myself than I ever had. But I do have a part of myself that wants this thing to succeed, like this book I made that kind of talks about my experience dealing with this stuff and, also some other things. But to me, it felt like all of the things that I went through, right? I transformed it into something that I think is super beautiful, and maybe other people don't, but I don't care. I think it's beautiful. And now it's like I want to help people with it because I wanted this painful part of myself. I want to change it and, maybe at least make it something people can look to, or maybe something that inspires people to face themselves in their own way. And, if anyone who knows me in my real life is that I cannot stop talking about this. And that's been also a really cool thing to figure out, like, oh, writing and wanting to help people is something that you actually care about. And that, again, goes into something like I'm learning more about myself because of this bad thing that happened to me. And so that's kind of cool in a way. And so I guess life after trauma, it can be, a really beautiful thing. It can be, now in the moment it sucks and it's the most painful experience, like dealing with your issues, dealing with the memories of it, resurfacing and visiting it over and over and over again. It's like, but you kind of have to some degree, right? I'm not a psychologist, but for me, as like I had to do it to eventually get past it, to accept it, forgive it, and then move past it. But yeah, and so I don't know. I think it's not an easy trek, but it's possible to live a meaningful life and to live something that, you feel fulfilled in a way, I guess. But I think all of us also are still chasing something. I think we're all, trying to go after something or feel something within ourselves. I think that this idea of like hunger within yourself, it doesn't go away necessarily, but it's almost like making peace with that hunger, right? And noticing like hunger in itself, that feeling of like I want more, that's also just another emotion that you're observing, right? That you're aware of, but it's not fully who you are. It's a part of you. And so yeah, I guess, I think to like anybody that's maybe going through what I went through, or just another traumatic event that felt like their world was completely shaken or completely, you know what I mean? You don't feel like you can live on, or you don't feel like you can move forward. You can, and you will. sometimes it takes people 10 years, sometimes it takes people 3 years. It's not really like a linear thing, but what I will say is that you can live a meaningful life after going through something terrible. And it's not to say that you deserved that experience. Nobody deserves to go through something horrible, but it's to say that, I think for me, something that helps me move on, everything happens for a reason. And, it may not seem like that in the moment, but everything does happen for a reason. Everything culminates for a reason. And the difficult parts of life are kind of what give you character, what gives you, grit, and what makes you real. And I think for myself, I had to at least view it that way. Yeah, everybody has their own methodology and their own path, but for me, I had to view it that way. It's like, well, no, I wouldn't have loved the art I love now. I wouldn't have, all these things. Like, I wouldn't have been a real person without going through the things that I went through, whether it was my sexual assault, or whether it was some childhood things, or whether it was, the life post that I'm sure, and well, there was some trauma built into that too, all of these things that kept happening or did happen to me, all these patterns in my life that kept reemerging, all of it helps you gain more grit, and it helps you, become a deeper person, in the sense, not in the sense of I'm deep and introspective, well, kind of in that sense, but not, I don't know, it doesn't it doesn't make you, like, you know what I mean, read philosophy books at wild hours of the night, and not a false sense of deepness, but a real sense of, I understand deep emotional depths about myself, my own experience, the highest highs and the lowest lows. Like, I know all of this about myself, and I know what music I listen to in that moment. I know what art I consume, what food I like, what people I want to be around, what animals that maybe annoy me, right? Random things like that. You get to learn about yourself, you become deeper. And so I guess something for me is like, I guess life after trauma, it's deeply informative as much as it is painful. And so I think that try to view it as that, right? It's not just the end all be all of your story, and it doesn't have to define you. I think you can transform it, you can turn it into something beautiful if that helps you. But ultimately, facing it and facing yourself is the really only thing that you can do, and becoming at peace with every version of yourself, right? Like I described, life moving in frames, yourself moving in frames. If you're here and you're still looking back on this frame, and you have to let go of that. You have to let go of it, and it's so hard to do that. And it's not just something like you say, I let go, and it magically happens, right? You have to go through the work. You have to feel all the emotions. You have to cry every bit that you're supposed to cry through. Scream in a pillow, whatever you need to do, punch a wall. I don't recommend that. Destroying property is not good, but you know what I mean. You have to let go of it, but it's not something that you just say. It's something that you have to feel with your entire being, is that I let go of this, and I'm looking now forward. I'm looking at this present moment. I'm feeling the present moment, and hoping for a better future, but I'm experiencing the present. But the past is something you have to make peace with. I don't know if any of this is making sense, but I felt like I needed to record this for myself. Also just kind of like a journal entry for myself. But yeah, I think, just, I guess, give yourself a break, but also realize that, there's so much more for you in life. There possibilities are completely endless and unexpected, and you won't know what your life is going to turn into, but just know that, it happens for some type of reason. Even if it's something bigger than yourself, it's there for a reason. And I think that enough for me kind of allowed me to let go of it. It's still there in my head, but like let go of my attachment to that version of myself, or let go of my attachment to that, because if you want a new life and you want something to move forward, you have to like, kind of create like a new pattern for yourself, right? And also take responsibility, for how much you're holding on to past grudges or past pain, yeah, I think another thing to do, is if you're having a bad day, you're having a bad moment, maybe go to a coffee shop and write it all down. And if you don't feel better after that, just keep writing, keep talking about it. Um, yeah, I think that's all I can say on this topic, but just know that, moving forward is possible, and it's not, as far away as you think it can be.